Thank you so much, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute delight to be part of World of Business. We are living in a time of absolutely massive technological change. Things that were just a couple of years ago firmly in the world of science fiction are now science fact. And it's moving faster and faster all the time. The question is, how can we harness all of these technological advancements in our companies and at the same time preserve the future of humanity? Well, one of the ways that I think we can do this is by embracing out-of-the-box thinking. And when I think of out-of-the-box thinking, one of the people that comes to my mind, and probably to many of you as well, is Elon Musk. I think he epitomizes it better than almost anyone in our generation. I was reading an article about him recently, a little mini biography from a fellow by the name of Jack DeLosa. And he was talking about Elon's early influences. And funnily enough, one of them he had in common with me, which is a love of comic books. He loved the fact that these superheroes, some of which were just ordinary people, were out there trying to save the world. And that had an impact on him and on his business. He actually took that as part of his mission was, how can I use my life, my career, my investments to influence humanity? And that became his mission. In order to achieve that mission, he looked at a number of different modalities that eventually became his vision, and he settled on 5 things that he thought would be really important. One was the internet, another sustainable energy, the third space travel, and he also thought about artificial intelligence and genetic engineering. But when looking at those last 2, he wasn't sure whether they had the potential to either benefit humanity, harm humanity, or both, and for the most part, hasn't focused very much on those as aspects of his investments and his career. But today, I'd like to take you on a little journey into the future and maybe help you start to think about some out-of-the-box thinking with technologies that are on the horizon and are here right now. So one of the first technologies that I think everyone in this room would be aware of is augmented reality. How many of you have heard of it? Raise your hand. Yep, you've probably used it on your smartphone. How many of you have used it with augmented reality glasses? Anybody? Raise your hand. Yeah, a lot of you. I knew I had a tech-savvy crowd here. You know, we're looking at a digital overlay on top of the real world, and there are so many brilliant applications. Everything from being able to design and buy new eyewear and seeing it on yourself without going to a store to try it on, to in the industrial world, being able to have interfaces to your back-end SCADA systems and look in rows of pipes and see what kind of water pressure there might be or gas pressure, and look and see a valve that lets you turn things in the right direction rather than having guesswork at this massive pipes that previously you would not have known how to interpret the data that's sitting in these back-end systems but not integrated in. Now, I think AR and its cousin virtual reality should be mainstream right now, but they're not quite yet. And I think one of the reasons that they're not is that, number one, headsets are still very expensive, and we need to get the price point down to consumer commodity level for that to become really a mainstream technology. But the most important thing, at least in my view, is that a lot of these headsets are not very comfortable to wear, especially when it comes to virtual reality. My gosh, have you ever tried on a VR headset and, after a minute or two, you just want to take it off because it's too heavy and too uncomfortable. But not only that, most of these headsets are not designed for women. I cannot tell you how many AR and VR headsets that I have tried on that literally fall flat off of my face. They are not designed for half of this planet's population. And if they don't fit women, how are they going to fit kids either? We need to have a little bit of out-of-the-box thinking and not just designing a cool product, but also thinking about the different ways it can be used and the people who will be using it. Another technology that's going to have an absolutely massive impact on our world just in a couple of years are driverless vehicles. This is a picture of a Toyota concept car that I took last year. And it is super cool. From almost any angle you look at it, it is just beautiful. And it has an artificial intelligence engine in there. It has autonomous mode as well as manual driving mode. And the aim that Toyota had with this concept car was to actually have the car become man's best friend. I don't know if it will quite achieve that. I think most people still might like their doggies or other pets to be their best friends, not their cars. But this car and its AI actually has the ability to pick out when a driver might be starting to fall asleep and take over in autonomous mode. One of the things that is absolutely clear, and that is that every car manufacturer in the world, bar none, is looking at autonomous vehicles and planning to roll them out into their fleets in commercial model year 2020 or 2021. That's 2 to 3 years away. And not only that, but most of them are electric or hybrid electric. And I've got to say, here in Australia, we're really behind when it comes to electrical vehicle infrastructure. Down in New Zealand, Spark, the telecom company, is actually repurposing payphones to have EV chargers to be able to try to take up electric vehicles and help save the environment. And there are going to be a lot of ripple effects with driverless cars, not just on people whose jobs might be displaced, but also think about things like ethics of who do you hit when there's an unavoidable accident and who's at fault? What happens to traffic infringement revenue when all of the infrastructure has Internet of Things sensors that are broadcasting out the speed limit and what color the traffic light is and when you should go or not go? The ripple effects through the economy are going to be absolutely huge. Another really exciting technology is something that was first designed by Elon Musk in 2012, and it's Hyperloop. How many of you have heard of Hyperloop? I think pretty much half the room. So what we're talking about here is an autonomous vehicle that is inside of a tube that is depressurized to a practical vacuum so that you don't have air resistance. And what these pods have could be either people or cargo, different size pods, hurtling through them at an average cruising speed of 760 kilometers an hour and a top cruising speed of about 12 to 1,300 kilometers per hour. So Elon came up with this idea in about 2012, but what's fascinating is that because he was so tied up with his Tesla company and with SpaceX, he decided to open source the idea to get the best inputs from around the world. And we've now seen a number of companies that are starting to build real Hyperloop systems. The one that I've pictured up here is from Virgin Hyperloop One. Richard Branson brought into it late last year. There's another one, Hyperloop Technology Transport, and they're vying right now for real-world contracts, and it may just be a couple of years before we see the world's first Hyperloop, likely in the United Arab Emirates, in between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, cutting a ride that's an hour and a half long down to 12 minutes. Here in Australia, there are proposals to put Hyperloops potentially along the East Coast. Imagine being able to get from Sydney to Newcastle in just 10 minutes. That would completely change the dynamics of living in a regional area. It would have a huge impact on the property market here. It would have a huge impact on the regional economy. And just a few days ago, Richard Branson was talking in the UK about building a Hyperloop between London and Scotland and being able to get there in 45 minutes, and another Hyperloop between Heathrow and Gatwick, and essentially creating a super airport. There are a lot of countries around the world that are seriously entertaining Hyperloop proposals from different companies. And so far, testing is proving out, and it looks like this could be a reality in the very near future. Now, I mentioned that Elon Musk came up with this idea and then sort of sidestepped because he was involved in other things. But last year, he got really frustrated while driving in horrible traffic in Los Angeles, and he thought, you know, this is idiotic. We have these huge high-rise structures. We've got three-dimensional cities, but our traffic is two-dimensional. What the heck? Why don't we have three-dimensional traffic systems? Why don't we have tunnels that go 10, 20, 30 levels beneath the city in multiple directions that are going at super speeds using hyperloops? So he came up with another idea called the Boring Company, as in tunnel boring, and he decided that one of the things that he wanted to do was take this very old technology and make it orders of magnitude faster and better than it is today. Last year, he talked about a potential or provisional agreement to put in an underground hyperloop along the East Coast in the United States, going from Washington, D.C., through Baltimore, through Philadelphia, and up to New York City, allowing you to do that commute in 29 minutes. And a lot of people said, poo-poo, that's not going to happen. Well, a couple of months ago, he actually received approvals to start doing experimental digging in Washington, D.C. for a hyperloop, and also has approvals to do similar things in Baltimore. This could be a reality, literally an underground hyperloop. And one other thing, rather than just having one big train station or one hyperloop station, his vision was that you'd have multiple stops along the way where you'd be able to embark and disembark from hyperloop. Space travel is becoming a reality, and it's thanks to private entrepreneurs like Elon Musk with SpaceX and Jeff Bezos with Blue Origin and Richard Branson with Virgin Galactic. And the thing that's going to make space travel a reality is reusable rockets. It's something that none of the government space agencies were working on, but we've now proven that it's fact. That is going to open up our solar system to space exploration, to colonization on other planets, to mining on the moon, and to mining in asteroids. The amount of jobs and services and industries that are going to come out of this is going to be phenomenal. There are already private companies that are looking to establish colonies on Mars. One company called Mars One is looking to have its first unmanned demo mission to Mars in 2022. That's only 4 years away. SpaceX, which is Elon Musk's company, is looking to do its first manned mission to Mars in 2026. And Mars One is hoping to start establishing colonies with people in the early 2030s. My gosh, if this isn't out of science fiction, I don't know what is, but it looks like it's becoming reality. And by the way, Mars One is not looking to invent its own rockets. It's looking to leverage on investments like SpaceX and use their rockets to get to Mars. Another really cool idea that Elon Musk came up with late last year is the idea of taking these same rockets that can go into outer space that are reusable and use them for planetary transport as well. So he came up with yet another company called BFR, B for big, R for rocket, and F, I'll let you guess what the F word stands for, right? But his idea is to take these same rockets and allow you to go from, let's say, New York to Shanghai in 32 minutes. Of course, it'll take you 4 times longer than that to get through airport or rocket security. But the idea is out-of-the-box thinking. Not taking something that is seemingly impossible and taking that as the answer of, no, it'll never change. It's always going to be like it was before. Being willing to take that risk and have that vision and actually execute on that vision. Another area that's changing very quickly is our aviation industry, and I'm not talking about commercial airplanes. I'm talking about drones, and they come in lots of shapes and sizes, and you're probably familiar with them for things like videography or asset inspection. But where it's really hotting up just right now is in the area of flying cars, and in particular, flying taxis. The picture that I have on the bottom left here is the world's first flying taxi. I saw it last January at the Consumer Electronics Show, so back in 2017. It's a working prototype. It's able to carry 220 pounds, about 100 kilos, and fly for about 22, 23 minutes, completely autonomous. The way that you program it is you have an app and you tell it where you want it to go, and it takes you there. Of course, there are some regulatory hurdles in getting there, but there are lots of companies that are now starting to talk about flying cars being a reality. Just in the past couple of weeks, Uber was talking about flying taxis and wanting to have commercial trials in Los Angeles and Dallas-Fort Worth by 2020. So another really interesting concept in this space comes from Airbus. And let me show you a short clip. Now, mind you, this is not a working prototype, it's just an animation. How many times have you been stuck in traffic and just wish you could clip on helicopter wings and get above it? What if you had something like this that let you do that? What would the impact on traffic be? What about air control and airspace safety and regulation? A lot of things to think about with this whole new world of flying cars, but there's a lot of thinking in this space that's happening. And in the US, Amazon and NASA have been working for several years now on an air traffic control system for drones, actually segmenting airspace for different kinds of drones of different equipage levels, like autonomous versus semi-autonomous, to fly at different levels. There's a lot of work being done on it, and one last interesting concept from this Airbus video is that it's being thought of as a way to hook in with long-distance transport like Hyperloops. So once again, you might say, okay, right, you've got the EHang, it's a working prototype, but it's, still not quite there. We've got Uber and we've got Airbus and others saying, yeah, we think this is a cool idea. But what about regulation? Is it really going to happen? Well, let me show you an example from New Zealand. This was announced a very, very short while ago, and it's part of negotiations that have been underway for the past year and a half between the New Zealand government and a company called Kitty Hawk that's owned by Larry Page of Google fame. And they've designed, Larry Page's company designed a working model of a flying taxi that's called Cora. And this is the picture of Cora. It looks sort of like an airplane, but it has vertical takeoff and landing capabilities. And then once it's up in the air, it actually just goes sort of sideways like an airplane does. The important thing about looking at this is that this project has been done in conjunction with the regulatory authorities in New Zealand, and they're hoping that there might be at least a prototype commercial flying taxi service in 3 years' time. My gosh, 3 years from now, we might have flying taxis very close to our doorstep. What are we doing about this in Australia? Are we even thinking about it? Underpinning so many technologies is artificial intelligence. And when I use the term AI, I'm actually talking about an umbrella term. It encompasses a lot of different technologies: machine learning, deep learning, natural language recognition, image recognition, facial detection, emotion detection, chatbots, smart robots, and a whole lot more. And it sounds so new and so cool and so science fiction-y, But work in AI began all the way back in 1956. What's changed are our processing capabilities and the amount of data that we have. So in the early days of AI, what you would do is you'd program it to mimic a human expert. In about 1980, we started to develop techniques called machine learning, where we could start having the machine learn by itself by feeding it data, but still with quite a bit of human intervention. So if I wanted an AI to recognize a stop sign, I'd still program in the borders and the fact that the sign is red and had the word stop. In about 2010, though, we started on this exponential curve of capability of AI through a technique called deep learning, where rather than having a lot of human intervention in the loop, the AI starts to learn a whole lot by itself. And the reason it's able to do it is twofold. One, masses of data, big data, whether it's structured or unstructured or videos or documents, you name it, it does not matter. And specialized chipsets called graphic processing units that allow for parallel processing and really fast, real-time implementation of a lot of different applications. One of the applications that many of you will start to see in your lives, if not already today, in the very near future, is speech recognition, and that is actually natural language recognition. How many of you on your smartphone today use Siri or Cortana or Google on your smartphone? Anybody? Does anybody have one of these home assistant devices like Amazon Alexa or Google Home? Well, I don't know if you saw this, about a week and a half ago, Google put out a video of its very latest iteration of its assistant AI called Duplex. And this video had it conversing with a real person on a phone call, making an appointment to get a lady's hair done. And the AI sounded like a human, including putting in words like and aw, and the person on the other end had no idea that they were actually talking to a machine. They had another example where it was making a restaurant reservation and the conversation started to go off course, but the AI was able to self-correct and get it back on course about making the reservation. Natural language processing is getting very, very good, and the AI underneath of it and the conversational capabilities that it's capable of are getting increasingly good. We're also starting to see AI becoming woven into many of the applications that we use on our computers as well as our smartphones. And this is actually a screenshot from my computer. When I first bought it, I had High Sierra, and I had Siri turned off because I actually value my privacy, and I didn't want Apple to know everything that I was doing on my computer and record every conversation that was in earshot of my computer. So I wanted it off, but it kept popping up and wanting to come back on, and I ended up taking my computer back to an earlier OS to get rid of that and some other problems. But the question that you have to ask yourself is, with these digital assistants, who owns the assistant, the software? Who owns the data? And how is it being used? And you've got to realize that the way that these AIs work is that they're listening for a keyword like, hey Alexa, or hey Siri, or okay Google. And in order to do that, they've got to always be on and always listening. And frankly, the business models of a lot of companies that are making these publicly or available are based on data collection, data analysis, and in many cases reselling it. Who do you trust? Where's the boundary with privacy? And I know Rachel Botsman's going to be talking a bit more about that tomorrow, and I encourage you to hear what she has to say too, because I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation. You know, when we've got such convenience at our fingertips, and it's so tempting to want to be able to use it, do we trust the companies who are designing and keeping the software? Another aspect of artificial intelligence that is increasingly part of our lives is facial recognition. And boy, is it getting good and fast. There are systems out now that can scan a database of 1.6 million faces in less than a third of a second, be able to recognize people from all kinds of angles in a crowd. Facial recognition is already being deployed in casinos around the world to recognize VIP customers as well as banned guests, by police departments to identify criminals as well as missing people or perhaps people with medical conditions. And it goes beyond that, because we now have AI that's capable not only of figuring out who you are, but how you're feeling based on the expression on your face. And it's not just the expression on your face that can be used for emotion detection. It's also the words that you use, or the cadence of the words that you use, or the intonation that you use. One of the fascinating things about facial recognition is the failure rate of when things go wrong. And it turns out that facial recognition is really accurate when it comes to identifying white men. But when it comes to identifying women or people of color, then it starts having higher failure rates. I was reading a research paper recently that said that the reason this was happening is that the data sets being used to train these AIs were predominantly filled with pictures of white males. So we've got to be careful of not accidentally introducing unconscious biases into the databases that we use to train AIs, because we can end up with some unexpected results. It's not just still images that are being used in artificial intelligence applications. There's a brand new piece of software from a company called IC Real Time that is doing real-time monitoring of CCTV feeds and being able to have a natural language interface for people to query these live CCTV camera feeds. So let's say there's been a bank robbery or an ATM robbery and somebody was seen wearing a red jacket. You could type in "man in red jacket" and Ella, the AI, would pull up the relevant segments of the CCTV feed to show you all the film clips that had people in a red jacket or a red shirt, or whatever the phrase happened to be. So right now it's text-based, but in the very near future, you can bet it's probably going to be natural language voice-based as well. Now, image recognition is great, but what you need to recognize is that AI is not infallible, and image recognition is not infallible. And there are research papers that have shown how easy it is to trick an AI by jiggling less than 1% of the pixels in any image. So to a human eye, that pyramid or that bus will look like a pyramid or a bus or an ostrich or a dog, no matter whether you jiggle the pixels. But to an AI, you can change a pyramid into an ostrich just by jiggling things that are imperceptible to the human eye. So as we're starting to rely on image recognition, we need to be cognizant that what we think we see from a machine perspective may not be what is actually out there. And what about what you hear? Well, guess what? When it comes to AI, there are now prototype programs, and this is one from Princeton and Adobe that's called Voco, that allows you to do editing of natural language speech in someone's own voice. So you can imagine there's some really great applications. Let's say I was doing a video podcast and I flubbed up a word or two and I wanted to fix it. I could go in with an editor in text, change a wrong word to the right word, and it would sound just like me because it matches up the phonemes from a number of syllables from other words that I've said. But what happens when someone takes a recording of your CEO and changes what he or she is saying in a recording and says, I want you to transfer $1 million to bank account X, we're overdue on an invoice? How many times have you had a phone call from someone and you recognize the voice and you say, all right, that's my boss, and you act on it? We need to start thinking, well, is that actually real? Is that what the person is truly saying, or is this maybe a fake? And it gets even worse, or better, as the case may be, when it comes to fake news and fake videos. How many of you have heard of a term called deep fakes? A couple people. It's a montage of deep learning, which is an AI learning technique, and fake news. And what happened recently was that on Saturday Night Live, a number of actors, including Alex Baldwin, did impersonations of political figures. And somebody used AI software and basically took Alex Baldwin's performance of Donald Trump and superimposed images of the real Donald Trump on the performance to the point where you couldn't distinguish that it really wasn't Donald Trump. Now, imagine again, we've got world leaders. They say seeing is believing. If you saw a video of a political leader saying, we've just launched a nuclear missile, or there's a national emergency, and you saw it on news, you might think, wow, that's real, I'm scared. But what if it's a video of your CEO saying something like, we've actually admitted to a major privacy breach, and all sorts of ramifications fall down and flow on from that? So we need to get into this mode of just because it looks like it's real, it may not be. And funnily enough, one of the applications that may come to our rescue with this is blockchain. Blockchain may be a way of actually determining the provenance of a camera feed, recording the IP and the MAC address of a camera, and actually verifying whether it's a camera that could have indeed been filming your CEO or the President of the United States or someone else. So we may have some hope on the horizon with some financial technology. AI may also end up very, very shortly being weaponized. In fact, some researchers believe that 2018 is going to be the first year of a full-on AI cyber attack of digital assistants. So if you can imagine that you've got malware integrated in with your digital assistant, learning your habits, learning everything that you do, and lurking and waiting for an opportunity like bank account information or other specific targets, and then going after it, that may actually start to happen this year. So my gosh, where does that leave us? What about us humans? Where do we fit into this loop? Well, one of the things that I think is going to be fundamentally important as we start to bring more and more artificial intelligence into our world is to make sure we're raising AI correctly. So even though AI is tremendously advanced compared to where it was last year, and certainly back in the 1950s, I reckon it's at about a 2-year-old level and still has a lot to learn. There was an experiment late last year at OpenAI where an AI was using deep learning techniques to do a boat racing game. And for reasons that mystified the researchers, it never actually finished the finish line. It got obsessed with getting these green pop-up widgets to get points, was crashing into walls, doing everything except crossing the line. And the researchers, and many in the AI community agree with this, is that we actually need to have humans in the loop for reinforcement learning of the AI systems as we start to train them with data, and especially as we start to use deep learning techniques. Another way that we might train AIs and robots is actually putting the software into a physical body, into a robot. There's a company called Kindred that has this put wall, which is called Sword, where they're using humans in virtual reality control suits, teach robots how to handle delicate items. So they literally have a human controller that will teach you how to pick up a delicate vase versus how to pick up something that's made of cloth, and learn to manipulate different things based on the humans teaching it. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think that we're going to see a lot of jobs for human robot teachers, and that is also going to start accelerating this whole learning of AI. Empathy and humanity are also super important and super critical. And we're already seeing companies employ people with political science backgrounds and behavioral science backgrounds and philosophy backgrounds to try to train AIs to have human-like empathy. So even though an AI may be able to pick up on emotion detection, it doesn't actually mean that it's going to behave in an empathetic manner. And we need to build that into these new systems that will be part of our lives. Another important job of the future that I think is going to be fundamental is what I'm calling a chief ethics officer. And that's because one of the secrets that you may not know about artificial intelligence is that the bigger the neural networks get, the more likely it is that the researchers have no idea how an AI got from input A to decision B. An example that's a little bit scary comes out of the United States in the criminal justice system, where they had an AI that was being used to look at the potential of recidivism when looking at parole applications. And what they found was that the AI was being very lenient to white parolees and non-lenient to others. And they were a bit perplexed because none of the inputs had to do with race or ethnicity. But I have a theory, and my theory is that it picked up on the unconscious social biases of the documents about each of the criminals as he or she went through her or his criminal career path, and it spit that back out in the judgment. Having people in the loop to make sure that things are congruent is going to be so important to us to make sure that we're living in a future that we want to live in. So how smart can AI get? Well, I wouldn't put an upper limit on it. Last year there was a conference of AI researchers, and half of them, 50%, thought that AI could reach human-level intelligence by the year 2040 to 2050. And as we get out to 2075, 90% of the researchers thought that human-level intelligence might be possible. So what's going to happen to us humans? Oh my gosh, how are we going to live in this world? Are we going to take technology into our bodies too? Is that how we stave off the robots? Well, I think we probably will, and it's going to start with something most likely in the smart contacts world. So rather than having these heavy augmented reality headsets, imagine having all of that kind of capability embedded in a smart contact that also has biotech capabilities, giving you autofocus capabilities, and being able to do things like measure the insulin levels in your system by testing lacroglobin, a chemical in your tear duct. Imagine being in a room like this and looking out over a row of faces and being able to identify every single person and where you might have met him or her before, and the context of that, and tying into social media and being able to see what they're up to now, and having all of these amazing medical capabilities thrown into boot. That's on the 5, maybe 7-year horizon. Companies like Google, Sony, and Samsung already have patents for cameras in smart contacts that allow you to blink and start taking a picture or a video. And by the way, these pictures are Google prototypes. The big one is from 2014. The smaller one is from 2016. You see how there's a lot less opaque stuff? By the time it comes to market, it's probably going to be made of graphene, and it's going to be completely transparent. You will not know when someone is wearing a smart contact. Then we go to brain implants, and already, we've got all kinds of medical implants that we use, pacemakers, insulin pumps, and the next. But what happens when we start taking things into our body to do things like brain-machine interfaces, let's say in the medical world to control a wheelchair or a prosthetic, or in the industrial world to be able to control a robot or some other piece of machinery, or even relatively trivial applications like putting an implant right here in the metacarpal area of your thumb and forefinger and being able to open a door. I mean, I wouldn't stick something in my hand just to be able to unlock a door. I think that would be a bit premature. But there are already so many researchers that are looking at this whole idea of brain-machine interfaces. I'd like to show you a really short clip from UC Berkeley of a project that they're working on called Neural Dust. It was funded by DARPA. DARPA has this program called ElectRx, or Electrics, where they're looking to be able to have interfaces inside a human body to be able to control soldiers' anatomy while they're in the field, to be able to control their nervous system. And the implications of this are really quite staggering. So UC Berkeley is one of 7 companies that received grants under this program, and they've designed this neural dust, which is right now still millimeter size, and they're able to embed it in rat nerve fibers and through ultrasound be able to pick up signals that are inside the organs of your body. So you can imagine how many incredible uses there would be to be able to control things in your body of a medical nature. But what if you flip it around and you think, okay, that's my employer that owns that implant, and they're able to control my nervous system and maybe my pain levels. Do I actually want my employer to have something in my body? Wow, that's actually quite a profound question. But this work is continuing, and they're not the only ones who are looking at this. I think the medical implications and the potential medical benefits are going to make this technology a reality, especially when you think about disease management and quality of life management. But we've got to look at some of the ethical issues and the security issues and the privacy issues as well. And by the way, that's millimeter size now. The next level is to get down to the nanometer size. And wow, once that happens, then where is the limit? One of the things that some thinkers, including Elon Musk, say will be required is to actually have an interface in our brain that actually melds an AI into our neocortex. So one of the companies that Elon has recently founded is called Neuralink, and he has this idea of having a neural lace mesh, being able to literally tie your brain, your organic brain, into an artificial intelligence. But if something like that happens, and you've got the machine doing something and you doing something, how do you know who's responsible for any given decision? If a machine fills in the blanks with something, are you really responsible, even if that thing is in you? And I know it sounds science fiction. Gosh, I grew up on this kind of stuff. But in 2015 at Harvard, they had already designed a neural mesh that was made of polystyrene, and it's injectable in that it unfolds, and they put it into mice brains and were able to receive signals from the brains through this neural mesh. I think we're at least 10 years or more out from this, but it's in the realm of possibility. Another futurist thinker, Ray Kurzweil, thinks that the way that we might go about meshing humanity with machines is through DNA nanobots, basically using our own DNA to print nanobots, which will connect our cortex to the World Wide Web of wherever it is in the 2030s. Imagine wanting to solve a problem or having a question, and you think a question and you get the Google quote-unquote answer directly into your brain, or you want to send an email and off it goes just with the thought, and oops, hope you don't send it off too fast. Or you want to learn a new skill and you download it like Trinity did in The Matrix, and suddenly you know how to fly a helicopter or do something else. And think about the medical applications of nanobots in your body that are able to monitor your organs. That could be pretty cool, but we're coming onto the edge of, wow, what does it mean to be human? I think one of the really big jobs in the very near future is going to be a brain-machine interface specialist, and it's already a very strong area of study in universities. Another big job of the future is going to be in the area of regenerative medicine, stem cells, and genetic engineering. At Salk University last year, they were doing some experiments with mice, and they found the gene that was able to reverse aging for a mouse that had progeria, the rapid aging disease. Can you imagine turning back the clock and becoming younger? Wow, who wouldn't want that, especially as you get a little bit older in years? There's another researcher, Professor Yunir Bayam, who believes that aging is epigenetic and that within the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to figure out what that switch is. And once we do, then human life is going to be expanded by 5 to 10 times. Imagine living 400 or 800 years old. Oh my gosh, what is that going to do to society? And it's not going to just stop there. Why should we stop just with changing our age? Why not change exactly what we look like? Forget about plastic surgery. Why not have appendages that we haven't even imagined, or appendages that are best suited for outer space? Wow, where are we going as humanity? I think that there's going to be an inevitable temptation to take technology into our bodies for a lot of reasons. And when this happens, which is right now, we're going to start creating a new species. And I think it's a combination of Homo sapien and technology. I'm calling it Homo technica. Somebody else may come up with a better word, but I think that once people start taking this into their bodies and start having godlike capabilities, telepathy, mind-to-mind communication, we're at the next level of humanity. And it's up to us right now, this very point in time in human history, to take this kind of out-of-the-box thinking and imagine how we can use it in our businesses, but also imagine the impact on humanity and design a future that we want to live in. And that's really why I'm so thrilled to have been part of the World of Business Humanification Conference, because this is such an important topic. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shara.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move right on now with